It's a brand new day, and we'll be making history. Are you with me? Won't you stay? We have come so far. This is who we are. And like the rising sun, we have just begun to play our part. This is the time we form the chorus. Lift your voice for those before us. We can rely on one another. Feel the pride, let's show our colors. We are heroes and dreamers. We are restless believers.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever time it is, wherever you are. This is Gail of Gaia, and this is Free Range, where we graze on wild ideas, and we have wonderful guests. And I have a wonderful guest today who has done a lot of very serious research on some very important topics related to corruption in our government, in our states, not just the state of Arizona, but surrounding states. And I think we owe a debt of gratitude for all the work that he has done in this important area. So let me bring him on. This is John Harris Thaler, who wrote the book.
Well, thank you so much for having me.
Oh, I'm delighted that you decided to come on. I'm honored, as a matter of fact, because the book that you wrote is actually, some people might consider it dangerous for you. And I think you're well aware of that now too, as a result of several attempts on your life. Well, nobody wants to admit to the corruption that is goes on, but everybody knows that there's something wrong. And I think your book is a good example of what's wrong.
Well, and that was kind of the whole point. You know, when we started this off in 2019, this was an investigation into racketeering, and no different than most of my office's investigations into these subjects. And you know, what we found was every time, you know, we talked about it jokingly as like a rabbit hole. You know, every time we would go down one rabbit hole, we would find several others and have to go down those. And what started off as being fairly simple money laundering and tax evasion, and then, you know, the things that go with that. I don't want to make, you know, too much light of them, but they, you know, they didn't seem all that serious at the time. You know, blew into something much more significant, something much bigger, and something that's much more effective, you know, to everybody's daily life than they think it is. And so, you know, what was going to probably be about 6 months of investigation, you know, turned into a year, and then 2 years, and ultimately 4 years of investigation. And, you know, as you said, and as it's right over my shoulder here, you know, we put our investigation into a book so that people could see for themselves, you know, the narrative. They could read the narrative. They could see the evidence. As you know, because we've talked about it, not only do we have the book, which is about 630 pages, but also we have over 500 footnotes in the book that then refer to over 5,000 documents that all of the readers can see just by going to reporttothegovernor.com and clicking on the footnote section. You know, that way they can actually see the documents that we saw. They can read the evaluations, the forensic reports that we had prepared. And that way they can make up their own minds. If they think we've hit on something great, if they think we haven't, well, you know, at least it's not for being ignorant about the subject. You know, so that's how we got into it.
Let me share my screen with that page open so that people can see what we're talking about. And then I bring it over here. There we go. So this is John's book, and let me scroll on it a little bit so you can see more. So there's a lot of drug trafficking. There's a lot of bribery. And here's some of the documents. I don't know if they can see that. If you can see it, if you make your screen big, you can probably see it. But anyway, signatures and so on that you have discovered in the course of your.
And you're taking that from the website, for the book, which is
Right.
reporttothegovernor.com. And,
Right.
what we have on there is, we have obviously samples of things so people can see. But we have one section, for example, that's called investigation. And in it, we have up there, a number of videos that we have put together that provide you with a combination of both the documents and a narrative, so that you can not only, see documents, but have a narrative with it that explains, we put arrows on things, so you can see exactly what our investigation is, how we did it, what documents we used, how we conducted it. And again, like I said, one of the things that happened, of course, is that, we became famous for this kind of unwittingly. And that is, we were asked to make a presentation last February before the Arizona legislature, before a joint committee. And, we were asked, it was kind of a last second thing. And, Jackie Brager made the presentation. And, we certainly expected there would be questions and maybe some fallout.
They couldn't get her off the stage fast enough.
Yeah, we didn't really expect, the kind of reaction that we got. And, the mainstream media immediately tried to shut us down and tried to insult us and insult our backgrounds and what we had discovered and evidence. By the way, not having once any of them asked for any of the evidence. And we just took it coolly and calmly because, we were working on this book. It took, almost a year to put together. And you can imagine with all of these documents, it takes a long time. And we knew what we had. And I knew that when this book was finally published and out, there weren't going to be any questions, because once you read the book, I think it answers everything that any critic has ever said about us. So, we welcome that. We welcome kind of the silly criticism of, you can't possibly be right, and you're a MAGA this, and, any other name you want to throw at us. Because in the end, we've got a book, you don't. We've got 5,000 documents supporting our 630 pages, you don't. And if any of the mainstream media want to come back and question any of it, we're here. And notice how this book it was officially released in mid-October. Not one mainstream media company that wrote an article about us, back, in February, March, April, has come to write anything whatsoever. I mean, we've basically shut up the critics.
Yes. Well, they don't want anybody to know anything about it, actually, is what it boils down to.
No, and that's the problem. The problem here now is that, with all of the documents available, and like you showed, they're on our website. We have a number of them in the book as well. It makes it very hard to ask questions, and it makes it very, very tough when you don't really want the answers. As you said, they don't really want the information. And so it's been great for us because, we said, told you so, and here it is.
Well, it's just amazing how many falsified documents and signatures and so on that you found. Now, one of the main ways that some of this was done is through the purchase of homes, single-family homes. Could you explain that?
Look, nothing. It's very interesting. Most people don't live a daily life where corruption is a big part of it, and it shouldn't be. And so they don't live in that atmosphere, and they don't live in, an atmosphere where, unless they're reading up on crime or studying crime, they don't pay attention to racketeering. I mean, some people kind of know what it is, but, most people's daily lives are not affected by this, and it shouldn't be something that affects them. But most of the things that we talk about in the book, one of the points that we make, that I certainly try to make repeatedly, is that there's nothing really new here in terms of the schemes, in terms of what's a racketeering scheme. We have, money laundering, which is common, tax evasion, which goes with it. We have insurance fraud, both life insurance fraud and auto insurance fraud. We have what we call payroll theft, which is done by hacking into computers. We have bankruptcy fraud. And we have, computer hacks and falsifying, taking documents that have been recorded or have been filed with courts and changing those documents. That's nothing new. The scary part of this is that these techniques are nothing new. What was new here is the level of corruption in the state of Arizona and the fact that so many of the leaders in the state, both elected and appointed, have some involvement in it. So, usually you see these things in more private sector and with private companies. But in this particular case, what you wound up with was a slew of, everything from judges to city council members, to lawyers working, in prosecutors' offices, et cetera, all taking part in some form or fashion in these schemes. And as a result, the entire system of governance in Arizona has become corrupted, and almost to the point where, unless drastic steps are taken, the state of Arizona essentially is lost. And what that really means, we talk about that a little bit with California. People talk about California, everybody's moving out, the state's a dead state. Arizona is actually in worse shape, and here's why. Because, and I've talked about this before, when we live our daily lives, we depend on our institutions. We know that, judges have biases, they're not totally necessarily fair, but we believe the institution is. We believe that when we file a lawsuit, it'll get heard. We believe that when somebody's suing us and we have a different point of view, we'll be able to express it. What we have found here is that the system is so rigged that whether you're an individual or whether you're a large-scale company, a large-scale employer company in the state of Arizona, you cannot ever be sure that you're going to get a fair shake. And, at that, when the point gets to that where the trust is lost, where you can't depend on your institutions, where you can't depend on a document coming out of a courthouse as not having been tampered with, that order or judgment is real. When you can't depend on any of these things, the whole fabric of everything falls apart. Why follow rules if there's nobody enforcing them? And that's the danger that Arizona is now slipping into. Yeah, and that's the danger.
And then when you have actual law enforcement involved, where's the enforcement going to come from?
Yeah, and that's one of the other problems. And we talk about this a lot in the book, is especially with the city of Mesa. The city of Mesa is in and of itself, a racketeering enterprise.
That was a job jobber. Yeah, that's what I'm going.
Yeah, I mean, the city itself is a racketeering enterprise. Everybody involved in operating that city is somehow involved in some form or fashion in organized crime. They make money off of this. That's what they do. That's what it's all about. It's not so much the power. It's the position comes with money. And they are very happy to make the money. And they do. And there's nobody challenging it. And there's nobody who can, because within the Mesa Police Department's police force, they have a separate, smaller group of officers who help enforce the racketeering and get paid for that. So, the problem is that, how do you stop it? Well, you certainly don't stop it at the local level, and you probably can't stop it at the county level. Everybody has heard for now years about how Maricopa County is. So, you have to hope that you can stop it from the state level, maybe, but certainly from the federal level for sure. And, in a time where we are all not all that trusting of, federal agencies, of the U.S. Department of Justice, of the FBI, that's tough. That's a tough place to go to rely on anyone to fix anything. But, that's where we're at.
And that's what's really frightening, because even when you look at the corruption at the federal level with the current administration, shall we say, it's just unbelievable. And it's like you say, the problem is enforcement. I mean, be well informed and end up on a train ride to a FEMA camp,
Right. Well, some of the things that I talk about in the book, is I don't try to let it go as just this is awful, this is awful. But we at least, try to touch on some of the reforms. I mean, a lot of the reforms come from, a governor and an attorney general, who are not bought off. That's not what we have at the moment. They come from
Thank you.
They come from the federal government coming in and putting what's called the consent decrees on the cities to make, to force them into reform. But the problem in this particular instance is, we tried in this book to say, look, there's some systemic issues that are so easily fixed. For one example is, if you simply change the manner in which judges are elected, originally appointed and then elected to office, you could wipe out a whole lot of the corruption in the judiciary just by that change alone. Just to make it kind of simple for people, in most states, judges are appointed at the Superior Court, the county court level, are generally appointed by the governor. And that usually runs through a committee at the Bar Association, which then runs through a committee, that works with the governor to appoint people. There are peer reviews that are sent out. There are ratings that are given. I get from California, for example, I get several times a year, I get letters from the state bar asking me to review a potential candidate for judge, because I've had some interaction at some point in my career with that particular lawyer. So there's a whole process, and it takes a long time to go through. That is not what happens in Arizona. In Arizona, and I'll give you an example of Maricopa County, judges are appointed are essentially appointed by the governor, but they come from a list of recommendations made by the county supervisors. County supervisorial districts amount to 5 in Maricopa County. And each one of those 5 districts has 2 people who serve as liaisons to appoint judges. So if the 2 guys in, say, Queen Creek, want to have somebody appointed, they make a deal with the 2 guys from Avondale who want a guy appointed, and ultimately everybody's guy gets appointed. There is no review process. There is no rating system. There is no peer review. There really is no vetting. As long as you are in good standing with the state bar, in other words, as long as they haven't thrown you out, you too can be a judge. And that allows for this corruption to occur, because it allows for this push through of people who are really unvetted. And I've said this right before, there are some very, very good judges in the state of Arizona. I have had them on cases I've been involved with. I've argued in front of them before. There are some very good judges. But overall, this state has the worst judges on the planet. They know the least about law. They follow the law the least. And they have a system that allows them to be lazy. For example, California, Nevada, other states, if you file a motion, you have a hearing, you stand before the judge and you argue your motion. Not so in Arizona. In Arizona, you file a motion, the other side files their opposition, and 30 days later, you get a motion denied, motion granted. You don't even get a decision opinion on it. So you don't even know why your motion was granted or accepted, or denied. You have no idea. And the other problem that comes with that, which is the problem we talk about in the book, is that if you don't argue before the judge, you have no way of knowing whether the judge ever saw your motion. You have no way of knowing whether that order denying or granting the motion actually came from the judge. You don't know if the judge saw the papers. You don't know if he knew about what you were arguing. You know nothing. And that's what permits the fraud in Arizona. And these are things that you could simply fix with a legislative pen, but nobody wants to do them because, again, that's what happens when you have a corrupt system.
Well, here's another area of the corruption, and I'm not sure exactly, like I didn't get all the way through your entire book, so I don't know if you cover this at some point. But I know that there was a part where you were alluding to the 4th highest incarceration of all the states. There's got to be a money trail.
Well, one out of, you and I talked about this a little bit before. 1 out of 13 Arizonans is a convicted felon. 1 out of 13. There's nowhere on the planet where that exists. Firstly, what Arizona considers a felony, and secondly, what they do to incarcerate is really unbeliverable. It's one of those things that's very easy to overlook when you're talking about corruption within judges and within city council people and mayors and all that, is the fact that it makes it very easy to put enemies in jail. And one of the things that we have found happens here is enemies go to jail, and those who are part of the problem get off. And we talk about in the book the ways that happens, how it happens, how cases are run through the system to do that. But it's really sick. We estimate that there were probably well over 1,000 people over the last 10 years within the city court system, in the misdemeanor court system, who were charged and probably incarcerated, at least for a brief period of time, for no other reason than that they stumbled on somewhere to the corruption and had to be taught a lesson. That's dangerous. That's extraordinarily dangerous. But that's what you're dealing with in Arizona. With respect to the incarceration rates, we actually have a chapter in the book early on where we talk about this problem, where we talk about things that California, Nevada, New Mexico, Colorado, other neighboring states have done to reduce incarceration, but actually reduce recidivism at the same time. And all of these states have been terrific at reducing incarceration rates at the same time preventing repeat offenses. Arizona is the exception. They've done nothing to reduce incarceration. Money is made by so many off of the incarcerations. And at the same time, they've done nothing to reduce recidivism rates. So it's not just that they're putting more people in jail, it's that putting more people in jail has been totally ineffective.
And here's the other thing. They have a rule, in other states, there's a thing called good time, not in Arizona.
Yeah, I mean, this is, look, this is the whole systemic problem here, is that nothing in this state is geared toward making things better. It's geared toward solving an initial problem. You think somebody's a felon, throw them in prison. That's what you do. There's no consideration whatsoever for what's going to make them a better citizen, what's going to keep them out of jail in the future, what's going to get them a job, what's going to solve, the discrepancies between where they should be in life and where they are in life. And, that's really unfortunate. This is not, like I said, this is not a book about prison reform, but it is a book about how, antiquated systems are in Arizona and how so many of those antiquated systems play into the corruption. Oh,
definitely. And the people that suffer the most in are the lower income people too, because they're so easy to incarcerate, because they I'm sorry, but we call them public pretenders. I know there are a few good defenders out there, but most of them are public pretenders, and many are more concerned with advancing their career than they are with actually helping people. And I'm sorry to say that, but it's just a fact. The same thing has happened in the medical field.
Gail, I'll go beyond that. It's not even because I've had to deal with a lot of public defenders over the last couple of years. I would say this about it. I have met some who are very good, but what mostly happens, which is different than other places, is that public defenders, there is a public defender's office in Maricopa County, for example, but most of the public defenders are public defenders on a contract, meaning that they take regular cases and then have contracts with cities like Mesa or Gilbert or Phoenix, or Avondale or Goodyear or Carefree, et cetera, to then go in and represent people. So these are regular lawyers who have contracts with these cities to represent people. And the problem that this creates is kind of the obvious one. It sounds kind of good on paper, because it's kind of the idea being is that rather than having an office of public defenders like most places do, we're going to go out into the community and we're going to make sure that that what we call good experienced lawyers are hired to handle cases. The problem is that when you've got a situation, for example, like mine, where I'm dealing with corruption and I'm dealing with racketeering within a city, and I ask a public defender or even a lawyer who has contracts with the city to represent me, that he doesn't want to do it. He or she doesn't want to do that because he or she doesn't want to jeopardize their contracts. Lawyers who do this make a lot of money, at least make a stable amount of money off of these contracts to represent people. Mesa is one of the largest that basically contracts out, for misdemeanor charges. They contract out, to private attorneys. The problem is that creates a conflict with the private attorney, because the private attorney doesn't want to argue anything against the very city that's providing him with a contract. And it's amazing how nobody over the years has complained about this problem, but it's a huge problem, and it means that it's whether you could get the best lawyer in the world. The problem is that the arguments he has to make on your behalf wind up cutting insufficiently to his income. He's not taking your case, or certainly not taking it seriously.
This is what's so disturbing about everything in this country and this state and all over is money. People steal for it, people kill for it, people take bribes. I mean, everything comes down to money. And some of the little people get caught up in the drug dealing to make money to keep their rent paid and different things of that nature. And some it's just pure greed.
One of the worst things that we see, and one of the worst things I think the book, it certainly implies, if it's not stated outright, is this problem where you've got, this very lower echelon, lower income class person bringing drugs over the border, or stashing the drugs in their house, or handling the cash, etc. So on the lower end, you go into court any day. You go into Maricopa County Superior Court any day of the week, and you will see people being charged with drug offenses, and it's mostly not using them. It's mostly storing them, selling them, etc. And usually not a lot of drugs, but any drug is obviously not good, and they get arrested for it, and they ultimately plea out to a year or so in jail, and they get a year in prison. Meanwhile, the people who are really benefiting from the money laundering end, from the end of selling at the higher end of the distributor end, the distributor amounts of drugs, the millions of dollars going through distributors, and suppliers, that's entirely different. Those are the judges, those are the city council people, those are police officers. So the people at the higher end really making the money here, not making ends meet, but making the money, are the people who never get charged, never get arrested, never get investigated, while the people underneath who are actually carrying the drugs, to essentially to kids, as we say, are the ones who wind up paying the price.
Such an unfair system. Well, now who pays for all of this incarceration? I read somewhere that you said that taxpayers pay for 43,000 inmates in the state of Arizona alone.
Yeah, Arizona has kind of, I believe it's one of the highest per capita rates in the country, and they also pay one of the highest amounts per prisoner. Which is kind of amazing when you see, look, I don't wish anybody go to a jail and take a look at it, but if anybody ever has the yearning to do so, yeah, they should, because you'd wonder in a second where your money is actually being spent. I mean, it's amazing. For what little those incarcerated get. And how much of it they have to pay. This is something else that's very unique to Arizona, is the pay to play. When you go to prison in Arizona, unlike other prisons, you get 3 meals a day, you get certain toiletry items, etc. Not in Arizona. In Arizona,
they make you pay for it.
You pay for it. Yeah.
That's
you
criminal.
have what's called you have something called a canteen system, where you pay for it. So if you want, they'll make sure you have a meal in the morning and a meal in the evening.
And the meals are pretty horrible from what I've heard, because I know some people that have been incarcerated.
Beyond horrible is a word for it. Beyond horrible. Usually what you get is some peanut butter, a roll, maybe a piece of fruit, nothing to drink. You have to drink out of your water fountain, and that's about it. If you want actual food of any sort, what you actually do is you buy it. Once a week, you fill out a requisition list, and you check off what you want, and then that comes out of an account that you set up.
And it's extremely expensive, John. I can tell you, because I know, because I have someone I know.
Yeah, it's not cheap, and the only way, if you're somewhat indigent, if you don't have family and friends who can dump money in your canteen account for you, then the way you make the money is by doing the work, is by cleaning up the floors, scrubbing the walls, cleaning the bathrooms, whatever.
And some people they don't allow to do that either. There are certain people they don't allow to do that either.
No,
I mean this. I can't believe how bad it is.
It's a very problematic system.
Now, I heard, and I don't know if this is true or not, now the clerk's office is very guilty of a lot of things. And one of the things that I've often wondered about in terms of payment, I don't know that the taxpayers are paying as much as the inmates themselves who are having their accounts, their trust accounts tapped into. Do you know anything about that?
Well, yeah. One of the things is that, this goes for everything from medicine to food. You're going to get charged for it. And so what happens is that, as I said, you have to pay, and whatever method by which you can do so, if there's any assets whatsoever, they're going to wind up, securing your assets to pay for you being in prison. And like I said, that if you can't pay, you wind up in the system where you've got to work, as much time as you can to build up the credits to put
where they can pay you like 35 cents an hour.
Yeah, it's not as bad as that, but it's bad. But
it's been that bad in the past, because I knew
Yeah.
somebody who was getting
Well,
paid
and
that.
it's also kind of irrelevant whether they get paid a quarter or they get paid $5, because when the money is almost assuredly going to pay for the food, it doesn't make any difference. There's no profit coming back whatsoever. There's no profit coming back to the prisoner. In other words, prisoner doesn't leave with, a couple of $100 in the bank. The prisoner leaves
Oh, no.
with a few extra dollars maybe, and it gets provided to them on a debit card when they leave.
Yeah.
But for the most part, they're not making money, so it doesn't really matter what they're charged. They could just say,
Well,
look, you sleep on the floor, you get a meal. It's the same thing.
Well, yeah. What I was getting at is they pay so little it wouldn't even keep up with what they charge for the vendor items. Because, for example, a little pack of ramen noodles, which most people can buy for a quarter, they pay $1.50 for, and
Yeah,
things of that
that's
nature.
right.
There's some
and like I said,
racketeering going on with the jail system, I think.
Yeah, I mean, and everything's like that. Let me put it this way: there certainly is no discount here. So you're certainly not paying anything less than a normal retail rate, and as you suggested, in some cases, it's certainly more. Yeah, I mean, there's a profit being made off of everything, and there's a profit certainly being made off of the food.
Where does this go? Who's getting that money?
Well, right now, the money, this is interesting. There's two different ways that money gets made here. Arizona is one of the few states that has both a public and private prison system. It has an organization called CoreCivic, which is one of the largest private prison companies in the United States. If you are, for certain crimes, for certain cities, for certain counties, they feed into CoreCivic. If you're arrested in Mesa, for example, you're going to go to CoreCivic, and their jail system is mostly in Florence, which, as you well know, if you've been to Arizona, Florence and Coolidge are two towns. They're about an hour southeast of the Phoenix area, and those towns are basically prison towns. That's where all the prisons are. They have federal, they have state, everything is there. If you are arrested, a block away, however, in Gilbert, you're going to go into the county system. That's the system set up by Judge Arpaio, and that's run a bit differently. So on the CoreCivic side, it's a private prison. Who makes the money? CoreCivic does. It's a for-profit prison business.
Exactly. And if it wasn't for profit, they wouldn't be in it, because nobody really cares about rehabilitation of the inmates or their lives or their families or anything there. And we have many people that have been, in my opinion, put into jail unconstitutionally and held for an unconstitutional length of time, because most attorneys in the state do not operate under the Constitution, at least the original Constitution. Would you agree with that?
Well, one of the problems for sure is overcharging on bail. One of the biggest problems that suffered both in the city courts and in the county courts is overcharging for bail. And that is, trying to make money off of the bail. People don't quite understand this. It's a little bit like a bank. When you put up bail, you put up the money, and if it's a cash only bail, let's not go with a bail bond, which is a little bit different. If you put up if the bail you have to pay is $100,000, and it's a cash only bond, meaning you have to come into the court with $100,000, usually by cashier's check, obviously, because you're not carrying the cash. But you have to come in with $100,000. The city now holds that money, and the city is making interest off that money. You don't make the interest off of it; the city does. And if you think about how many people are incarcerated and how many bonds are paid, you can just imagine how much money is made alone off of the interest from the money put up for bonds. So the overcharging of the bonds is not to get the money necessarily from a bond forfeiture. It's to get the money from the person in order to get the interest rate. It's what we used to call playing the float. So when banks hold your money an extra day longer, they don't clear a check as quickly, in order to get that extra cash from holding your cash in their reserve. And so that's one of the things you see here is you see that cities especially will make money. Mesa does. Mesa makes as much money as it can, not just off of charging fines to defendants, but by overcharging bail and then coming back and holding that bail as long as they can to get the interest rate off of it. And which is entirely illegal. Bail under the Sixth and Eighth Amendment has to be designed to fit the crime. And it has to be designed specifically, as a way to make sure somebody appears, at trial. That's what it's for.
We had, yeah, that's what they say. But we have a situation where people are given bonds that far exceed the person's income or ability to pay the bond.
Yeah, exactly. And what they try to do is I wouldn't quite say it that way. I would say that what they try to do is they size up the defendant. Is this a defendant who likely has money? Is this a defendant who likely doesn't? And for any defendant who likely has money, what they then try to do is make the bond the most they can possibly make it, and make it cash only. So you can't even go to a bail bondsman. Yeah, it has to be a cash only bond so that they can make the interest off of your cash. That's what they do. That's what Mesa does. That's what Gilbert does, and it's entirely an illegal practice.
That should be illegal. It is illegal, isn't it?
It is illegal. The problem
but they do
is,
it anyway.
Again, who's going to come in and enforce it?
They know that exactly. And you know what? Even the inmates know that. I've heard and talked to some, and they just they don't believe there's any hope in the system.
No, not at all.
It's all about the money, and it's all about keeping people where they're at, because somehow there's money made. I have been told that every day in jail they get $6,000. Who the jail does. So I'm not sure where that comes from. Where does that come from?
Well, that's the question. It's an interesting system. Core Civic, for example, with Mesa, Core Civic is paid on a per inmate, per day basis from the city. In turn, the city has to make back that money. So it makes it back with excessive fines, excessive fees, and all the way up through excessive bail. That's how the city makes the money back. And
this sounds like the city council members and the people that make these rules have weaponized against the people.
Well, that's it. And that's why I said earlier that the biggest problem that Arizona faces is exactly this, that when people lose all trust in the systems of government, everything has some corruption to it. We all know this. But when you cannot trust any part of the system whatsoever, your society has fallen apart and your state has fallen apart. And that's really we really had a tipping point in Arizona where, I feel, and that's what I think I say in the book, we've really lost control over this. And what it would take at this point to regain control over a state like Arizona is maybe darn near impossible at this point.
I think just about everybody in any kind of public position probably should be fired and rehired based on and what they've done and what they can prove that they've done, because nobody's doing anything to make it better.
Yeah, and that's one of the problems. Look, one of the problems here is like I said, as we talk in the book, I talk a lot about just some simple things that could change some of the corruption. Again, how you choose judges is one. How you certify notaries. You asked me earlier about the houses. One of the common ways throughout the country of laundering money is to do it through purchases of houses. This has been going on, since there were houses and since people needed to launder. Cash purchases of land, cash purchases of actual single-family residences is huge. It's been huge for a long time in northwestern California, where marijuana is big, Sonoma County, where marijuana is huge. The marijuana trade, especially, the illegal marijuana trade, is famous for taking cash and putting it into houses. This has been going on in the Midwest, for 20, 30 years now. It's a very basic way to do this, but just some simple changes to notaries, to licenses of mortgage companies there's a lot of things that could be done, in 5 minutes to make this better and to make it harder to have the corruption. But, as you saw, the only person who was into any of this was Liz Harris, was Representative Liz Harris, who was a House member in Arizona. And 5 seconds after, Jackie Breger made our presentation, every effort was made to throw her out of the legislature for having supported our providing a presentation.
She did a very fine job, by the way. I was very proud of her. I'm sure you were.
And everybody should be very proud of Liz Harris. It takes a lot of guts to go from seeing a problem like she did, which was the election fraud, identifying how the election fraud worked, and then having the guts to go to the Senate and to the House. Not only, firstly running for office and getting elected, then going to the leaderships of the Senate and the House in Arizona and saying, look, I want to put on a presentation. I want to have a joint committee deal with election integrity, and I want to have speakers come in and talk about it. That was almost a non-starter. And then, of course, we were, in essence, surprise guests, as you were. We were asked to come in at the last minute. Nobody knew what was going to be in our presentation. And that was somewhat on purpose to avoid anybody being able to stop it from happening. And we made our presentation. And, it shocked, the state. It shocked a lot of politicians. And for that, Liz Harris, who they were already trying to force out, they did.
I mean, I hate to say it, but it didn't shock me for some reason. It really didn't. I guess I've known too many people that have gotten caught up in the system somehow, and I just saw the corruption. But it's important that it be brought out, and then you have all the documentation to back it up.
Yeah, and that's the thing. One of the things that we did is we said, look, we were given a total of an hour with basically 30 minutes to present and 30 minutes for questions. So we had to put something together. Look, as you said, we're looking at a 630-page book. We're not presenting 630 pages of a book, in 30 minutes.
Yeah,
so what we tried to do was put together the best thing we could, to give everybody an outline of what we were working on, what we were investigating, and then to say to everybody, look, legislator members, we can't present more than this. We can give you an overview of what we're doing. Come talk to us. We're willing to meet with you anywhere. We're willing to go over the evidence with you. We're willing to discuss, our reports. We're willing to discuss what our expert evaluators have said to us. We'll even share with you their reports. And of course, what happened? Not a single legislator, with one exception, and I won't mention who that is because of, we have some confidentiality with them. But other than Liz, obviously, who brought us in, only one legislator, actually contacted me directly and said, I want to know more. I want to see the evidence. I want to know what's going on. The rest of them, total silence. And worse than total silence. Well, worse than total silence. Some of them then went and lied to their constituents. They then said, oh, well, we looked at those, those pages that were presented on February 23rd, and we've decided there's nothing there, so we're not going forward. That's absurd. They knew that the presentation was minimal. They knew that what we had was over 5,000 pages of documents to show them. Not one of them asked to see them. Not one of them asked to look at any evidence. So they went and they didn't know what to say to their constituents. So they went and they lied. And we've called them out on this. We've called out Chapwick and Culloden and some of the others, for going back to their constituents and just bald-faced lying to them that they ever did any investigation or looked into any of these allegations. They didn't. And if they're telling you still that they did, then they're still lying to you.
And, I saw the looks on some of their faces. They were precious. I wish I... It's like, oh, God, we got to shut her up.
Yeah, of all the interesting things there was, when the camera kind of pans around a little bit, these are pretty much stationary cameras. So it's not like there's close-ups of people. But, if you look around the room, with some of the camera footage, you can see who's clearly unhappy over the presentation. And, lots been made over several of those people. I don't know what to say about it other than, look, our job my job is to represent clients. I'm a lawyer. That's what I do. My job is to represent them, their interests, do an investigation for them, and solve whatever problem they're having. In this case, the investigation kind of began with some low-level racketeering and especially some payroll theft. And as you know, it blew into something much greater. But my first responsibility is to them. My responsibility is not to legislators. It's not to elected officials or appointed officials for that matter. It's not to judges. It's not to the court system. My obligation is to my client. And, I did what my clients.
Yeah, that's because you haven't been bought off.
Yeah. Looking at the faces of these legislators. One of the things to note is that over 1/3, I think it's almost 40% of those elected in Arizona to the House or the Senate are also involved in real estate. Their day jobs, if you will, are in real estate, which shouldn't be any surprise. It's a huge number and frankly, far outweighs almost any other number we could find in any other state. So it's no wonder that people go from being involved in the racketeering, in the money laundering through real estate properties, and then wind up in the legislature, or go alternatively from the legislature back into real estate and back into the racketeering activities. Shouldn't be a shock at all.
You know, when we were talking about felonies back, I meant to tell you that you've heard the saying about go to Arizona on vacation and you'll leave on probation.
And funny enough, I actually wound up getting a client, after the presentation, a client that's exactly what happened. They went to Arizona for vacation and wound up getting arrested on what was an invented set of charges, and couldn't get out of the system. Went from one lawyer to another lawyer to another lawyer, couldn't get motions filed, couldn't get out of the prison system. Crazy. And, I've been told by friends of mine and even those I've met who know a little bit about our work and a little bit about the book. I've had, a number of them come up to me and say, you know what, we won't even drive through the state. If we're going, say, from California to Texas, we'll go around the state. We don't even want to go in it anymore.
I can't say I blame them that much.
Yeah. All I can say is I can't blame you.
I've been in Arizona for a number of years, and this is a fact. I have lost just about every vehicle I ever owned was stolen and impounded for some petty thing, like either I was between insurance states, or I was the registration on the vehicle wasn't up to date, or something like that. I actually became an American state national as a result, to try to remove myself from the corrupt corporate construct of the United States. But
yeah,
I don't
hard
know.
to do. Hard to do in this day and age. But look,
very hard.
That's the problem. When I first started going to Arizona regularly was in the 1990s, the very early 1990s, and I loved the sense of freedom. I loved the lesser restrictions over things. I enjoyed the people I met. I still have a tremendous number of great friends in the state who I love to death, and I miss dearly, because I don't get to see them these days. But the state that I used to visit in the 90s is not what this place is now. And as we all know, what's corrupted it has mostly been the drug money, and the drug cartel money has mostly corrupted it. As I say in the book, there's about $15 billion circulating through the state of Arizona every year in drug money, in illegal drug money. And when you have that kind of money running through a state that has only 6 million people in it, actually, I think it's about 8 million now. So about 8 million people in it now. You got 8 million people in the state. You've got $15 billion of cash flowing through it from illegal transactions. Again, recipe for total disaster. And, it's to the point where I suspect that, especially from some of the work we've done for clients, for big business clients in Arizona, that certainly the ones I've worked for are not considering expansion in the state. And I think there's going to be more and more, especially as more and more people, understand what's in our book and what it talks about. There's going to be a lot of employers who are going to, like they do now with California, are going to avoid Arizona as a place to expand their businesses. And so, the people of Arizona are going to lose out on that, are going to lose out on the employment opportunities, the increase that it brings in housing prices, et cetera. It's going to hurt the state. And I think it already has.
Yeah, I do too. And there are people that are trying to address some of these issues that have gotten active politically. For example, bonds for a win, calling out officers and public officials. Where's your signature on the your oath of office, for example? Most of them. But again, no matter what you do, you run into the problem of enforcement.
Right. Right. And, and that's the biggest problem. The corruption that we discovered in Report to the Governor is so widespread that there isn't anybody to enforce the rules, because everybody is involved in their own corner of corruption. And for me to enforce the rule against you means you're going to come back against me. I've said this before, and I think I write about this in the book. Anybody who's probably 50 or over knows who Gore Vidal was. Most people probably under 50 do not. Gore Vidal was a playwright. He was an author. One of his major books was on Aaron Burr, called Burr. He wrote a number of movie scripts and screenplays, et cetera, et cetera. He was a very, very, very liberal participant in the 60s, 70s, 80s. Gore Vidal used to talk about Hollywood, and when asked, why did he hate Hollywood so much, he put it this way. He said, everybody in Hollywood lies. They lie about what they've done. They lie about who they know. They lie about, who they've met, who they're going to work with, who they have worked with, even who they've slept with. Everybody lies, and everybody knows everybody lies. So the worst thing you can do within the Hollywood community is blow somebody's lie. So what you get is a whole bunch of people who simply go along with the lie. You lie about your stuff, I lie about my stuff, I protect your lies, you protect my lies, and that's how life
we just live in us lies. That's so sad. So
and that's essentially what Arizona has become. Government in Arizona has become one hotbed of lies, and I will protect your crimes and your lies. You protect my crimes and my lies, and we'll all get along just fine. And so the problem is that even when you bring in young talent, new talent, people who are not corrupted, they walk into this system realizing that they absolutely have to, get along, go along, et cetera. They can't simply get out there and get ahead of this and do like what Liz Harris did. And that's one of the reasons why she was thrown out. One of the things I talk about in the book is that there was already a plan in place to get rid of Liz Harris from the moment she got elected. Long before the February 23rd appearances before the legislature, Liz Harris was targeted by her own party, by Republicans in her own party, by Toma and some of the others, to get her out because she was the Yahoo who was going to talk about election fraud. And in doing so, in talking about election integrity and the fraud, et cetera, they wanted her out, and they were already scheming to create sexual harassment charges against her and other ethical violations, entirely made up stuff to try to force her out before she could even have the February 23rd hearing. That's what they were trying to do. That's what they were working on. And we talk about this in the book, that, that's the problem. You get someone like Liz who, sees a problem, identifies it, wants to go to the legislature to solve it. And before you know it, the people at the top who are directly involved in the corruption make sure that you are ousted, that you either are put somewhere where you can never be seen or heard, or in her case, throw her out altogether. And do it on trumped up charges. I mean, the things that Joseph Chaplik did, who was the head of the ethics committee for the House, are unconscionable. I don't know how he sleeps at night. He lied to the public. He lied to his constituency. He lied to me. He certainly lied to Liz because there was an effort to get her out. This is where it's gotten in Arizona. So even if you want to do the right thing, even if you get people who want to run, this is what they're up against.
That's sad. We have a question up there you might want to answer. It says, why do U.S. prisons punish the families as well as the prisoners? It's down to the families to provide things for their loved ones, and the prison service only allows stuff to be sent from their vendors.
Yeah.
And the choices are slim.
Why do they punish them? Well, because they can, I guess, is the simple answer. The reason is because like anything else, if anybody has ever, give me an example. If anybody's ever hired a venue for something, it could be for a wedding for all it matters. But when you hire the venue, one of the things that they do is they give you a list of their vendors. So when you come into a hall, a reception hall where you're going to throw, a wedding party or a quinceanera or some kind of a special birthday party, whatever, you can't bring in your own caterer. You can't bring in your own decorators. You can't bring in oftentimes even your own music. You have to go off of their list. Now, I don't want to call it so much kickback, but in essence, that's what it is. They've got preferred lists of people, and that's who they use, period. And you're not allowed to use anyone else because that's where the financial relationship is. And whether it's literally in the form of kickback or it's in the form of special discounts or other advantages, this happens because vendors and these organizations have special symbiotic relationships that don't allow for anyone else to come in. And
wow, that's a real problem.
Right. The families absolutely suffer for this. Because you put the family in a position of, if we want to support our loved one in prison, what are we going to do? Let them starve? So, families absolutely have to get involved in servicing, anybody who's in the prison system. I'm not sure that's necessarily wrong, but certainly the way it's forced on them. And as you said, with the vendors, it's not like my spouse could go and get the top ramen at 50 cents a package or 25 cents a package and send it to me. If I want that ramen, you're right, I have to buy it through the vendor system. That's it.
Yeah, and it is very expensive, and it's more expensive for low-income people than it is for, which means that they suffer more, and they just don't have the means to. And then the phone system, that's another thing. Phone, to be able to communicate, they charge ridiculous prices for a phone service in Arizona. It's free. Why do we have to pay to talk to our loved one who incarcerated?
Let me make it worse for you. It's even worse than what you're suggesting. When you've got somebody in prison, they get a tablet. Let me explain for people who've never been in the prison system. Let me explain.
Yes, this is kind of a new thing.
What a prisoner gets is they get a tablet, which looks like a very glorified, iPad or Droid pad. It's basically what it is. Mm-hmm. And on it are a number of different functions. One is a phone function. One is an email function. One is a text function. So there's technically a texting thing there, even though there's no formal number, there's a texting function. There are games, there are books that you can get on your tablet, you can download to your tablet, and so on and so forth. So the tablet is very, very, very important to any prisoner because it is literally their connection with the outside world. That's it. This is the connection that they have.
It's a very censored connection, I might add.
Well, it's not as the censoring is. I'll get to the censoring part of it in a minute because there's some issues with that. But before we even get to the censoring part of it, anything you send by email or by text message technically it can be monitored. Phone calls are allowed to be monitored. Now, let's face it. You've got 1,000 prisoners in a prison. There's not a whole bunch of people in a room listening to this stuff. So what basically happens is that there are keywords, there are buzzwords, and obviously what they're looking for, realistically, what they're looking for is that if you talk about smuggling drugs into the prison on the next visit, that's going to get picked up. If you're,
I wouldn't think anybody would be stupid enough to do that, but
yeah, if you're planning criminal activity, that's going to be picked up. I mean, there's a lot of reasons for doing this, and some of them are good reasons. But the problem is of course, it makes very few things in real time. The texting system is about the only thing that's close to real time, where if I send a text to a prisoner and they have their tablet on them, it would be about a minute and a half, 2 minutes before they'll see it. They can respond. I get it in about a minute to 2 minutes. So it's about as real time as you get. Mm-hmm. In terms of calls and communications, the restrictions are actually much greater. In order to talk to the prisoner, I have to be on the prisoner's approved list. That doesn't mean from the prisoner. That means from the jail system. If I have any outstanding warrant or if I have any outstanding issues with anybody in the state of Arizona, I cannot be approved on their list. So the only people you can talk to are generally family members. I mean, that's about as far as it tends to get. So you get a couple family members who get approved, and those are the people who you can talk to. A spouse, your mom, your dad, your brother, sister. That's about it. Almost everyone else, they find a way to exclude. They don't generally exclude them from the text message system, but they will certainly exclude them from the phone system. So that's where that problem comes in.
They don't.
And let me say, not only that, you get charged on each end. So if for the person outside, if I want to send a text message to a prisoner, I get charged for that. And then on the other side of that, if the prisoner sends a message back to me, either they get charged for that or I have to send them what's called a stamp for them to be able to use to return back to me. Generally speaking, $10 buys you about 50 stamps. So it buys you 50 communications, basically. And then what they do to make it even more fun is they charge both ways so that when I send out the message, I get charged a stamp. When I receive a message, I get charged a stamp. So the 50 is really 25. It's 50 total both ways. So it's really 25 out, 25 back in. And so that's $10. If you're having conversations, every couple of days with somebody, and of course they're character, heavy. So there's 160 characters. So after 160 characters, you're now on 2 messages, not 1. So you can't even necessarily write as much as you would like. And so all these things have these issues with them. You try to send pictures to somebody. The pictures have to go through the email. They can't go through the text system. And those do get reviewed. And if there's anything in there that's considered even remotely subversive, it won't go through. I mean, you try to send a picture of my book to a prisoner, chances are the picture won't go through. It'll be censored out.
There was a picture of 7 sisters on something that I sent to someone, and they rejected it.
Yeah, and that's why I say they do a really great
star
job.
system.
Yeah, they
It
do
was
a really great
cosmic.
job of doing that.
I found that rather hilarious.
Yeah.
Let's see. Now, another area of, there was something else I was going to say, and I forgot what it was now. Maybe it'll come to me. But the other, I think that's important, which you have firsthand experience with too, that initially it sounded like a soap opera a little bit in the beginning, with you had a child abducted.
Yeah.
And you still
during the part of the investigation, unfortunately, involved my spouse. And when we got married in April of 2016, and there was no hint whatsoever of her having any involvement in any criminal activity at all. Right? I mean, it just wasn't the personality type, wasn't the person type. Just had a real job, had a real place to live. I mean, none of the things that you would think of as being a criminal were here. And shortly after we had our child, which was in December of 2017, slowly things started to come out about her family, that screamed involvement in crime, screamed racketeering. In 2019, fortunately, she was being very cooperative about this. So my spouse was talking to me about it and giving me information and providing information, et cetera, to the point where in November of 2019, she actually asked for witness protection. She asked myself and a colleague of mine, John Stanley, to help to provide her with an application for what's called WITSEC, which is Federal Witness Protection. It's kind of the one you see in the movies all the time.
Yeah.
And we started to do that. And about 3 weeks into doing that, family members of hers who were also involved in the crimes, found out what she wanted to do. I don't know how they found out, but they discovered what she wanted to do. And they immediately threatened her. They threatened my life. They threatened her life. They threatened our 2-year-old's life. And, that led to a panic where she took our child. She took him for several weeks and then slowly gave him back to me. Then did so again against a specific court order, prohibiting her from doing this. She did it again in April of 2020. And then with that court order still in place and having been restated several times by the court, she did it again in September of 2020. And I have not now seen my child, who is then almost 3. I have not seen him since 2020. So for 3 years now, I have been without my son because of this. And one of the things that I was told after the abduction was that if I wanted to see him again, I needed to stop the investigation. It's certainly not write a book about it, but certainly stop the investigation, and essentially, admit that I had, in essence, gone crazy. That I had fantasized these things, and come out kind of publicly saying, this stuff doesn't exist. It doesn't happen. Everything's all fine here, and I refused to do that. And since that date, like I said, they've refused to turn over my child to me.
I'm so sorry, John. That's just terrible.
It's terrible, and it also points out a big problem. Everything that goes wrong in your life can also be an opportunity. One of the things that we did is we formed an organization early last year called ProjectThaler.org, which is a charitable organization. And through that, we are helping families all across the country with abducted children. So, parents, where either the state has come in through, a child protective service agency, or where another parent has taken the child and won't give the child back, we get contacted and we help them with the legal. We help them, with the resources that they need. We do everything we can to help them get their children back. And so far, we've managed to get some children back. We feel very good about that. We have a number of cases right now in several states, including California, because this is where a lot of things go wrong, with the protective service agencies. To try to get children back. And we expect this year to be very successful. We think we'll get between 10 and 20 children back, either out of a corrupt system or back from a parent who's taken them. But we have, certainly one of the things that I hadn't realized, even in all my years of practicing law and even being involved in family law, I hadn't realized how extensive this problem is and how few resources there are. In Arizona, for example, in Maricopa County and really through the state, they have a program called court-appointed advisor, which is really a glorified term for a social worker who's appointed by the court to help the court determine custody. And one of the things that we found was, especially in the Maricopa County system, bribes being paid by family court lawyers directly to these LCSWs, these licensed clinical social workers, to get them to falsify their reports to favor one parent over the other. Usually a parent who's problematic in some way. So one of the things that I did recently is a couple of weeks ago, I sent a letter to the presiding judge of the Maricopa County Superior Court with allegations that we have found, especially on several particular court-appointed advisors. And we've asked now for the Superior Court to launch a formal investigation into the program and into a number of these advisors who we believe have spent a career taking bribes.
What about, I want to add this real quick. Lenny said that the family has to buy the tablet first. So that's another issue.
They don't always, not always. A lot of the prisons, that is not the case.
I think the county jail, they provide it, but at the prison state level, they
it's kind of, this is why it gets a little confusing. Most of the jails, the county jails, and let me explain a little bit of the difference here. Jail is generally where you go if you're going to spend either temporary, to go to a trial, or where you're going to spend less than 6 months. 6 months and less is generally something you go to jail for. Prison is actually a better place to go. If you are a low level, if you are not a violent offender, if you're going to get minimum security, prison is actually a better place to go than jail. Because in prison, even though, like you said, you actually pay for your tablet, but you actually get things like you can buy a TV. You actually can buy your own small TV, personalized TV. In prison.
Yeah.
So, it costs money for sure. And the costs are an issue, but the things that you can get, the things that you can do, even your mobility, especially in minimum security prisons in Arizona is like night and day compared to jail. Jail is very much like pods, a group of people being put together in a small setting. And that's it. That's where you are. You get some time on the yard to play and stretch your legs, but not a lot of time. There's a lot of discipline going on there, and it's kind of a mixed bag.
Yeah, the guards seem to get off on it.
Yeah, it's a mixed bag of who you're getting. In minimum security prisons in Arizona, and they have a bunch of them, you have a lot more freedom, including if you are, a model prisoner, even the ability to go out and work. They have work programs, and I don't mean programs where you're cleaning up the freeways, you're wearing your orange jumpsuit. I mean programs where you actually go, for example, Red Rock, which is in Winslow, just outside of Winslow, Arizona, has a program where they take you every day to Flagstaff, and you work in the court system in Flagstaff. You do clerical work, you're not doing anything heady here, but you can get out of the prison physically every day and do normal things that normal folks do. Dress in normal clothes, act normally, be normal, etc. So at least there's some advantages to that. But the jail system
far between, I think.
Yeah, the jail system is absolutely horrendous, and anything from mid security to maximum security is also horrendous.
It's horrendous. I know for a fact. I know some people have been there, and they keep people there, I think, longer than in order to force a plea deal.
That certainly has been one of the arguments, and it certainly seems to be the case. It's kind of an odd deal because they certainly keep people there longer than you would expect. However, on the plea deals,
I think 8 years just recently. I got to tell you that.
Yeah. I mean, that's not the longest anybody's ever been in without a trial, but they come dark.
That's so unconstitutional. It's not even funny.
Yeah, the worst part isn't even that. The worst part is actually the probation system.
Oh God, yeah.
One of the things that they do is that they will have you plead out to probation only, except that the terms of the probation almost are designed for the person to fail. And so, you know,
oh, that's what I've heard people say that.
Yeah, I've actually had a number of prisoners tell me that they will rather than get out on a probation, they would rather serve the entire time and be done and be out of the system.
Yes, I've heard it too.
Yeah, because they are the restrictions, the way they are chased around, the way that they are abused by the probation officers. They would rather do the time and then get out and be done altogether than have anything to do with the probation system.
That's pathetic. You know that? That's really our judicial system is a toilet that needs to be flushed and redone. It's awful, because I've heard a lot from a lot of different people, and we have people too. Whatever happened to no victim, no crime? That's the other thing. There aren't any victims, and they still put people in jail.
Well, one of the problems that we have in what we investigate is that with white collar crime, oftentimes there's not a discernible victim. And so that creates two problems. First problem it creates is that a lot of the law enforcement don't like to spend time on victimless crimes. So racketeering, money laundering money through purchases of properties, you know, seemingly doesn't harm anybody. Now, we argue in the book that it does, but on the surface of it, it doesn't harm anybody. Who's the victim? And because DAs and because state prosecutors can't throw people in a room and say, look, everybody, look, media, here's all of our victims. Here's the people who've been victimized. They oftentimes won't go after these crimes, which is one of the reasons why these things perpetuate. The second problem is it makes it harder for them to prosecute, because unless someone like me brings them the case, and this is what I've done, for most of my career. If I go out and I do the investigation and the client approves, we will provide all the evidence to, the federal or state agency that would likely prosecute the crimes. But we have to do that. If we call them up and say, hey, we're investigating this, do you want to come along with, or are you interested? The answer is no. We either provide them with the case top to bottom, so that all they have to do is go get the indictment, make the charge, get the plea deal, or go to trial, and they're done, or they won't do it. And so one of the problems with the victimless stuff is that it winds up leading to very little investigation and very few people ever put in jail, because there are no victims that they can point to. Everybody likes a good headline, and a picture is worth 1,000 words. If you don't have the picture of that victim, nobody's interested.
Well, that's sad. Lenny also mentioned the thing that's wrong with the U.S. and many other Western governments. Every institution is a capitalist one. In other words, they're all for profit. And let
me say something about that.
Profit for people.
There's a truth to that, and there's also a fiction to that. The for-profit problem, for example, with Core Civic, which is a for-profit prison, the for-profit problem certainly is there, and having walked around the facilities of Core Civic, then at the facilities, I can see exactly what the problems are, and of course, having heard from inmates, I can. The problem is that if you had a choice, for most prisoners, if they had a choice between the Core Civic jail or the Maricopa County jail, it would be a very close call as to which one they would pick. So the fact that the other one, the ones run by the state that come from, regular taxpayer dollars, are state run and are not, in essence, for profit, does not necessarily make them, better facilities or better places. The problems are different, but they all have problems, and especially in Arizona, they all have a great number of problems.
Yes, they sure do. I've known too many people who have suffered as a result of them, and so many people get off. Let me see what else I have. Based on your research, is it, I mean, this is kind of a weird question, but can certain people be set up, so to speak, by law enforcement because they want them out of the game? Yes. Or they want to swat them, so to speak?
Yeah, and it's probably one of the worst problems that Arizona suffers from. Look, it's not that this doesn't happen everywhere. I'm sure to some degree it does. We've all heard of officers who plant evidence.
Yeah.
A lot of look, there are a lot of terrific officers who absolutely do not do this, but it only takes a small percentage to ruin the whole bunch. And in this case, it's not only that you have officers who do that, especially in these city police departments, but worse than that, you have people like me who are specifically charged with crimes that don't exist, crimes that they have no jurisdiction to charge, as a way of trying to stop investigations. I mean, it's not just that I had 6 different attempts made on my life, one of which almost killed a client of mine. It's that, anything I tried to do within the state of Arizona would always be met with somebody trying to charge me with a crime. Like you said, it could be just having police follow my car and try to charge me with a speeding ticket. But it gets worse from there. It's charging me with violating a court order, or violating this, or violating that, something that couldn't have been violated, wasn't violated, and doesn't even necessarily exist as a law. We talk in the book about one particular police officer in Mesa, and about some of the things that he's been involved with, which are not only false arrests, setting people up, planting evidence, discharging his firearm, but that it's all done not just to take criminals off the street. This isn't a matter of we couldn't get that drug dealer any other way, so we planted a kilo of cocaine in the back of their car. As bad as that is, and as violative as that is, there's at least a way in which we understand why that could happen, even if it shouldn't. But there's another thing when somebody's investigating crime, is trying to assert their rights, and is thrown in jail for doing it. And yes, absolutely, Arizona probably is the worst for this. There are communities where this happens across the country, but in terms of a statewide problem, Arizona for sure has the worst of this.
That doesn't surprise me one bit, and I couldn't agree more. They, even people like me, with what I do, they don't like what I do either, because I have people like you on, and I have truth tellers and guests that I mean, I had a YouTube channel taken down with over 10,000 subscribers.
Yeah,
that I've worked years on without any notice or anything. Just boom, take it off. Boom,
exactly,
off.
and I've had to deal with my own personal safety. Not just the safety of my abducted child, which is an issue, but the safety of my former spouse, my personal safety, etc. Fortunately, our work does not just, and even the book mostly focuses on Arizona, but we talk in the book about a number of states and the histories of these crimes and how they migrated and got to Arizona. Fortunately, the work that I've done over 35 years of my career has touched on a lot of different states. And so those states not only respect what I do, but they are extraordinarily helpful in our investigations. They do not have the corruption Arizona does. So those states are very protective of me. They know the work that we've done. They know what crimes we've helped them solve. And as a result, I get a lot of protection from them. In Arizona, it's a free-for-all. There's almost not enough bulletproof vests in the world that I could wear to prevent myself from potentially being shot. And in fact, it almost happened on one occasion where I was stopped and literally had, the red dots of laser sights pointed at my head and at the heads of the people I was with. It was an extraordinarily dangerous situation. And really frightening, especially, I've done, like I said, I've dealt with this for 35 years. So I'm used to a certain level of the danger that comes with it. This one, as you know from the book, hit very close to home, and that normally doesn't happen. But, doing what I do for a living has dangers that come with it. And so I have to rely on police support. I have to rely on law enforcement. In Arizona, there's no relying on anyone. And that's really a shame. It shouldn't be that way. We should all want the state to improve. We should all want the state to be better. And, we should all want all of us to be safe. Just look at the number of fentanyl pills alone that get found. Look at the number of fentanyl deaths in Arizona, if anything else. I mean, you look at what's gone on at the border. Katie Hobbs announced, 2 weeks ago that she was going to send National Guard. Where are they? They never showed up. She never actually put through the order. It's a great political stunt where she did absolutely nothing. Of the Biden administration, partly because of Hobbs and her administration, and the people of Arizona are dying as a result.
And they certainly want Carrie Lake out of the game, because I guess now they're filing some big lawsuit against her, probably to financially ruin her. as well. Maybe
Yeah,
because
well,
of hers.
that's what they do. Look, if you can't, they're not going to put her in jail. Although I wouldn't surprise me if they tried. But certainly, if they can't hit you with jail, they're going to hit you with lawsuit after lawsuit after lawsuit. I mean, they're going to do whatever is possible to drain your bank accounts, whether they have to steal the money or whether they can force you into the costs. They're going to do that. That's how this works. And it's not a matter, it's not a matter of Hobbes or Fontes per se. It's a matter of when you're talking about, again, you're talking about $150 billion running through the U.S. annually in illegal drug sales, and about 15 billion of that running through the state of Arizona. You're going to have people with tons of money placing into office tons of people who will support their position. And that position is juxtaposed by people like Carrie Lake and Abe Hamadeh, who understand what's going on in the state and want to fix it. People like me who have thoroughly investigated it. We're going to be the targets. That's just how it's going to work.
Well, somebody was going to ask about the J6 prisoners and that situation. But before we do this, before we do that one, let me bring this one up. Tim Potter's asking, is Katie Hobbs still alive or has she been Gitmo'd?
Well, you'd think from some of the disappearances, she might have been Gitmo'd. No, she is alive and well and putting out tweets every day. It was funny. She put one out the other day. She gave the State of the State address, as most governors do every year. And of course, immediately put it up on X so people could see it. And, immediately about 500 people immediately said, get out of office. You're horrible. We don't want you here. The woman can't buy a break and probably shouldn't buy a break. She's kind of the poster child for all that's wrong with Arizona.
Yeah. And one of the things that turned me on her was when she said it was okay for, the transgender thing for children to have these things done without parental consent and stuff like that. I'm going, oh my God.
Well, it's just look at that and look at also her stance on school choice. One of the things that they have in Arizona, which has been very successful in many ways, is the voucher system, which allows parents to basically move wherever they put their child, the money moves with the child. So rather than money is going to schools, money is basically attached to the child. And that's allowed children in Arizona who have one of the worst school systems in the country to be able to go to parochial schools, be able to go to Catholic school, be able to go to Jewish day schools, be able to go to other private schools because the money follows the child. Is it a perfect system? No. Are there a lot of issues with that? Yes. But the problem is that at the same time, what she's trying to do is end that program, basically, in essence, forcing your child to go to what are absolutely horrific schools. The entire school system in Arizona, the public school system, almost everywhere, not every school, but almost every school, almost everywhere, are rotten to the core. The kids can't read, they can't do math, they don't know anything about history, they haven't learned anything. And that's what we're turning loose on the world, and it's disgusting, and we ought to be ashamed.
Wow, that's horrible. My God. Now, somebody's asking another question. Now, as far as Katie Hobbs, I don't know, are you familiar with realrawnews.com?
Yes.
Okay. Well, they said things about Katie as well as about Lloyd Austin. I know what I've read that he not alive in Ukraine, whether that's true or not. And then sometimes people get redundant lookalikes, you name it. My listening audience is kind of aware of that. But do you know anything about him by any chance?
Yeah, I mean, look, it's kind of when an administration acts as incompetently as the Biden administration has acted, it is very difficult at times to realize that a lot of what goes on really is incompetence and not some scheme. The Biden
yeah, really, they're not smart enough
because you want to say, look, nobody ever wants to think of a president as being stupid. Look, people do stupid things, but nobody wants to look at a president or a presidency as being stupid. And so it's a lot easier sometimes to believe that there's got to be something else going on. There's got to be some conspiracy than that these are just a lot of really dumb people. The story on Lloyd Austin is Lloyd is alive and well. Lloyd went into the good general went in for prostate surgery. It was a minor procedure. It's a very common one. If you're a male, you're over 60 or certainly over 70, you've probably had it. You went in for a minor surgical procedure. Wasn't really that big a deal. Why on earth they didn't tell somebody about this is not a mystery in the sense of conspiracy. It's a mystery in the sense of just absolutely horrific judgment. And then to make it worse, he was home for I think 2 days, and then had complications from the surgery, which is unfortunately not uncommon. Went back to the hospital and wound up spending 3 or 4 days in intensive care. He's still in the hospital now, but spent 3 or 4 days in intensive care, where he clearly could not have carried out any duty as defense secretary. And so, it's easy to think of this as being a conspiracy. I'd like to think of it as just unfortunately, just another example of just abject stupidity on the part of people who work in this administration. It's
scary stuff.
I don't know why they need one, but there apparently haven't ever been any rules about when, a cabinet position, somebody in a cabinet has to actually tell the president that they're going to be incapacitated. You'd think you wouldn't even need a rule on this. You'd think this would just be obvious.
Common sense. We don't have it anymore.
Yeah, apparently there just haven't ever been any specific written rules. So now we're going to finally get a specific written rule that says if you're going to be incapacitated, you kind of have to let people know this. Like I said, you would think this would be logical. You'd think that this wouldn't be a problem. But guess what? It is. And it's crazy that it has to come to this. And like I said, for an administration to not understand the conspiracy theories that come out of this, of course they do, because nobody wants to believe that everybody at the top is this dumb. But this was just plain dumb.
That's kind of scary, isn't it?
Yeah. And that's why it lends itself to, well, there must be something going on. Well, maybe he flew somewhere secretly. Maybe he had a secret rendezvous in China. No, this was just plain dumb.
Wow. Well, somebody probably would like your comments on the J6 prisoners.
Yeah, this is, look, I think there's two different ways to look at this. And they're both important, and neither side of this should really be overlooked, I think. And that is this, whatever the totality of what happened on January 6th, in 2021, certainly was a tragedy for all of us in the sense that there's a difference between protest and even being angry about a situation and how you handle it and how you handle it effectively. I mean, one of the things that the January 6th folks did, a lot of them, not all of them committed a crime, obviously, but a lot of them is that they really set back a very important movement. Election fraud is huge. We talk about it in the book. I especially talk about it. I mentioned other states, but I especially talk about it in Arizona and in Maricopa County. I talk about the fact that Trump won the election in Arizona. Forget the other states. I understand people have issues with other states. But in terms of Arizona, we talk about the numbers and how Trump actually won the state of Arizona in 2020. And we do it by showing the evidence. We do it by showing the math. We do it by showing exactly how the fraud was committed. We do it even by showing you ballot signatures and the falsified ballot signatures that were used. We do it with evidence. How far does that get us? We'll see. But the problem is that claiming everything to be a fraud and then going to the Capitol and rioting at the Capitol, even if all you did was go in the doors, even if all you did was after the doors were broken into and the glass was broken, even if all you did was walk in and walk around, you're not helping. You're not helping. And so to think that you're not going to have the country is not going to put out very serious repercussions to people who did that, is to not really understand the fundamentals of the country. Again, this goes back to how we feel about our institutions and the trust in our institutions. The other side of this is, and it's an important side, is that, look, people like me who have done investigations, who do investigative work, know darn well that the elections have a great deal of fraud in them. I'm not going to comment so much on specifics of overall elections.
Maybe I should take my YouTube channel down.
There's been people who have said far more about it than I, and who are very good at it. I will make one other comment about that in a minute because I think it's important. But we all know that, in states like Arizona, certainly in states like Pennsylvania, we know about Georgia, Wisconsin, et cetera. We know that there is fraud. We know there's a great deal of it. And we are constantly frustrated by the inability of the Republican side, which has been mostly harmed by this now over the last few elections, and the Democrat side, which used to complain about this, and all of a sudden when it was their candidates winning, somehow these machines are great and the ballot signatures are great, et cetera. We are frustrated to no end that nobody does anything to solve the problem. That as much as investigators like me can put it in a book and lay it all out for you, lay out the foundations of it, show you the evidence. What's anybody doing about it? Nothing. In the state of Arizona, nothing. You've got a Secretary of State who falsified election appointment documents. We've shown those documents. You've got a current recorder for Maricopa County, let alone the former Secretary of State was, but the current recorder who's got falsified documents. You've got a system that's totally completely hacked. And you've got an idiot governor who sits there and says, "Oh, our elections are free and fair, and aren't they wonderful?" Again, you have to wonder where the line is between conspiracy and total stupidity, and the frustration that all of us as Americans feel, because again, elections are the great final bastion of democracy, of our rights, of our freedoms. We have this ability to vote. And when that's taken away from us, when our votes don't count, and we know that they don't, there cannot be any greater frustration. So on the side of those people who committed violent acts, or certainly took advantage of the people committing violent acts on January 6th, it's hard to not understand how it got to that, and really hard to understand how this wasn't worse.
Well, there was infiltrated by a lot of FBI provocateurs as well.
Let's talk about that as well. The amount of infiltration is still kind of left to be determined, but certainly, the desire to get Trump in any possible way, certainly overtook any kind of reasonable judgment on the part of the FBI or other law enforcement agencies. Look, it is always going to be the case that you're going to have, anytime there's going to be some large-scale protest, there's going to be some infiltration of that by law enforcement, because you want to prevent bombs, you want to prevent violent acts, you want to prevent crimes from being committed, especially where people could die. And the only way you're going to do that is to embed those things with agents. This got out of hand because the desire to harm Trump, harm his presidency, and ultimately prevent him from ever running again overtook the common sense part of this, where you have some people embedded to prevent, a bomb from going off, some kind of, physical attacks on House and Senate, representatives. I mean, the second part, that's understandable. The first part is not. And so one of the things that you've even seen now is that even the New York Times has, published articles in the last month or so being far more sympathetic to a number of the J6 defendants, and pointing out that maybe this was total, complete overkill. And maybe, there may be some people for sure who deserve to have charges brought against them, but 30 years, 20-year sentences for this, is outrageous. A year or two, 3 years, maybe up to 5 years for some of the worst. I understand, but charging some of the people that they charged who did nothing other than show up that day to voice their opinion, to charge people simply for the protest itself, is about as anti-American as you get, and it should be fought with everything we can possibly use in our arsenal, certainly our legal arsenals, to stop that from continuing and to prevent that from ever happening again. What's gone on here is just an unfortunate travesty of justice for all of those who participated at every level, from the overcharging to the oversentencing to holding people without bail, or creating, again, the bails that nobody can pay, the number of people who have been held, number of people who have been investigated. It's entirely, completely unnecessary for a problem that really does exist and isn't getting the attention it deserves.
Yeah, I see somebody made the comment, Tim made the comment, maybe 20 or 30 days maximum. I think the violence was actually created by the agents. And
there's certainly evidence that whatever else happened with agents, they certainly didn't do anything to dissuade violence. And to the degree that they probably participated in it or even maybe encouraged it, certainly is a strong possibility here. But it shouldn't have even gotten to this issue. Look, if people break into something, whether it's the Capitol building or they climb the White House fence, look, you're going to get arrested and you're probably going to go to jail. That comes with the territory of the protest. But what's gone on here is so beyond anything that can even remotely be seen as reasonable. And again, like I said, it's not just that people got 20 and 30 years, that the poor boys got 20 or 30 years.
That's ridiculous.
It's that people who showed up simply to voice their opinion and to protest, got thoroughly investigated, a lot of them got thrown into jail, having really done absolutely nothing and nothing that would ultimately be chargeable. And like I said, when even the New York Times is starting to look at some of these folks and is saying these charges don't make sense. Why was this person ever put in jail? You got something there. Something's wrong.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's the length of sentences. I think people have been brainwashed in this country and have kind of become desensitized to how long that really is for somebody in some little cell, and to think they're going to come out of that a better person. No.
Well, again, and that's a big part of it too. What are you doing here? Part of the problem is that sentences are supposed to go to the individual. How do we prevent the individual from participating in crimes in the future? Probably, if somebody said 20 to 30 days, probably doesn't. What you're not allowed to do, and you're not supposed to do, which is what's been happening here, is make examples out of people. And what's really happened here is this idea that if we give people these ridiculous sentences, no one will ever come to the Capitol and protest. The problem with that is that, yeah, chances are no one's going to break into the Capitol again. You probably won't see this happen again, hopefully. But the alternative to that is that good people who go and protest are not going to. And think of it.
Yeah, because they're going to think I might get arrested.
Well, think of it specifically from Martin Luther King. Had Black leaders in this country in 1968 been arrested for protests the way in which January 6th defendants were, you would never have gotten to I Have a Dream. You would never have gotten to the March on Washington. Things that are pivotal to our country's history, you'd never get. The ability of all of us to go and protest, to write a letter to our congressman, to go hold a picket sign outside of an office, of the Capitol building for that matter. Our ability to gather and show our support for something or our disdain for something is what makes America great. And it's what makes us different from all those communist countries, those socialist countries, those dictatorships in the world. That's what makes us different, is the ability to share our voices. And you have to have this balance between trying to prevent break-ins to the Capitol, break-ins to stop votes, on and on and on, weighing against the actions of stopping good Americans from being able to express themselves and express their opinions and join in protest. We have to be able to do that. And what's happened here is a total lack of balance, where everything that's gone on from this Justice Department has been, so focused on this narrative, which is a false narrative of what happened on January 6th, to the detriment of understanding the value of the First Amendment and why it is so important to our democracy. That's unfortunate, and that's really, to me, the worst part of it.
Yes. Lenny made the comment, the J6 people got jail and the election fraudsters got nothing.
Well, not only the election fraudsters got nothing, but look at what happened in the summer of 2020 with BLM and Antifa and those movements.
They got nothing either. Yeah.
Where people died. And, what did people do? They donated money to BLM, to a fraud organization.
They was going to the Democratic Party.
Yeah, that's the scary part, is that, you saw, I still see the commentators from some of the mainstream media standing there saying, oh, these are peaceful protests, when the background behind them, things are on fire. And they're saying, and they're commenting to the camera, oh,
the media has
peaceful protests that I'm at here. No, you're not.
The media has been an enemy of people. The media is weaponized against the people. They lie.
For those who remember it, the media has become Baghdad Bob. For those of you who don't know, Baghdad Bob was the press secretary for Saddam Hussein. And while bombs were falling in the Capitol, he was giving press conferences every day saying, oh, there's no bombs. The Capitol's perfectly safe. Everything's fine. And every 5 seconds, he would have to duck for cover because a bomb would come in. That's essentially how the mainstream media has handled things. Look, somebody asked me the other day, and I think it's an important question. If Trump doesn't win in 2024, later this year, if he doesn't win, will we have riots? And I said, maybe. I said, but if we have a repeat of 2020, yeah, we probably will. It's unfortunate, and I wish we didn't, but probably we will. Whoever wins in 2024 better win by a fairly sizable margin, because if we have these kinds of voting situations where somebody's ahead and then all of a sudden, a drop of mail-in ballots comes in and they aren't ahead, like what happened in Arizona, yeah, there's going to be riots, and probably ought to be, because I don't know at this point how else you fix the system. Like I said, in report to the governor, we talk about this. We talk about what's wrong in Arizona. We're very specific about this, exactly how the systems work, how the percentages of how they do things are incorrect, how the entire system has been geared to falsify elections for whichever party, but have been geared to falsify the election results. And we've also talked about the infiltration into, the county recorder database, which is where all the election results come in from each county. For Maricopa County, for example, we talk about this, that votes come in, they're put into a database within the county recorder's office. And what we've been able to show definitively is the infiltration into that system. That system is infiltrated with the court, it's infiltrated with the recorded documents, and it's infiltrated into the databases. So you have three things going on in Arizona. You have voting machine problems, which we know happened in 2022. You've got the mail-in ballot fiasco, where you've got hundreds of thousands of mail-in ballots put into the system and counted that are falsified, where the signatures do not match. The signature on the outer ballot envelope does not match the on-file signature. And you've got manipulation of the actual database where the votes go into before the counts are announced. You've got a trifecta, and it's awful. And it's not going to change until really somebody comes in and literally changes it. And I'm not sure at this point who that's going to be.
Wow. We have quite a mess to clean up in our country. But in order for that to happen, we have to be grateful to people like yourself who helps bring this information and evidence forward, so that people can't just pass it off as some conspiracy theory. Because I'm sure you know as well as I do that term was coined by the CIA back when JFK was assassinated, and if you didn't agree with the official narrative, you were a conspiracy theorist, and that has carried on to discredit people all this time.
Well, one of the things that, I get asked about a lot, and I was asked about early on is, well, February, March, April. Well, when's the book coming out? Well, where's the book? Well, where's the evidence? We want to see the evidence. Great. But the thing is that this is an investigation, and we weren't going, the old saying of, we will serve no wine before it's time. We were not going to share everything with everybody until we could put it into a book, as you see over my shoulder here, where we could put it into a book, where we could put out the documents in a format where people could see them, where we could come up with a way of doing it, which we have. I'll explain a little bit of that in a second. And where we could provide, sufficient evidence for everyone out there so that there isn't a conspiracy theory situation going on. We wouldn't put it out otherwise. Anybody can write anything. Anybody can go on a show and say anything. Like I said, we have 630 pages in this book. It's a lot. I've got a copy of it here just to show you how thick this thing is. 4 pounds. This is a 4-pound book. And, not only is this thing 4 pounds, but as I said, the pages have within them 507 footnotes. Those footnotes relate to over 5,000 pages of documents, which are found on the website, reporttothegovernor.com, the website for the book. We have a footnote section right at the top. You click on that, and it goes in order, and you go to it, with all the footnotes if you want to see them all, or certainly the ones you want to see. And so we provide you all of what we investigated. Now, like I said, we've reviewed well over 150,000 pages of documents. We didn't want to give you all that. It's just way too much for anybody to look at. But 5,000 pages, including all the forensic reports, the handwriting reports, the question documents reports. We wanted people to be able to see what we look at and how investigations work. So, one of the things I spent a good deal of time on in this book is explaining methodology, without getting into the weeds of stuff. This isn't a criminology class, but to explain what we looked at, how we looked at it, what we saw, why we thought it was suspicious, who we sent it to be reviewed, how it got reviewed, et cetera, so that you can follow along with as much of this as you want in seeing exactly how this investigation was done, so that nobody will have any question about the integrity of what we did and how we did it. We thought that was very important. We've actually, as you and I talked about earlier, we've made the book available to everybody watching tonight. We've provided to everybody a 10% discount code. The code is Gail, of course. Why not?
Thank you.
So just if you want an autographed copy of the book, if you want to get it from Amazon, you're free to do so. Barnes and Noble carries it. Ingram Spark carries it. Almost all of the internet-based booksellers now carry this book. We've actually found it all over the world now. But if you want an autographed copy, I'm happy to sign it and even personalize it to anybody out there. You just go to our website, reporttothegovernor.com. You put in the discount code GAIL, and we have both paperback and we have the hardcover. That was what I just held up, was the hardcover available. And I will be happy to sign it for you and get it out to you at a discounted price that does beat the Amazon and beats the Barnes and Noble prices. We're happy to do that for you. We love your audience. Certainly, I couldn't do what I do if there weren't people like you, Gail, doing what you do, and bringing these issues to the attention of everybody. And you are greatly appreciated by me and by my team, and I'm sure by your audience for doing this.
Thank you so much. And this has been a wonderful presentation. I want to thank you and your team for all the work you've put in here. I know how much work footnotes are and all that. That's a lot of work. That's a lot of work.
I am very fortunate to have, it's interesting. One of the things that was said early on after Jackie Breger made her presentation was that, oh, it's just the two of you. It's just you and your girlfriend doing this. I don't know what to say to people who say stupid things like that, other than one of the things that I put at the beginning of the book is an acknowledgement section where I talk about a number of the people who are directly involved on my team, who work with me consistently, who work with me consistently on this book. There's a lot of them. There's several lawyers, there's several investigators, there are several researchers. These are all wonderful, terrific people who certainly are probably grossly underpaid for what they do, but believe in what we do as a law office, as an investigative body, as a private investigative body, so that we bring you that which is accurate. This is outside of, we can say, like I said, we can say anything, but having the evidence, having the documents, being able to show you, to be able to show you the 2020 mail-in ballots, to be able to show you a number of signatures on those ballot envelopes and the comparison signatures to show you that these signatures were false, that these ballots never been counted.
They weren't even close.
Yeah, not even close. We want to show you that evidence, and we show you in the book, both in the book and in the footnotes, both. We actually show you those actual ballot signatures. You can make up your own mind if you think these things are anywhere close to anything. But we have, that's why we have forensic experts who review this stuff with us and write reports. We have over 1,500 pages of forensic question documents, examiner reports of, examining handwritings, examining signatures, examining documents, et cetera, where we determine that they are fraudulent and why, and how we got to that. And so, like I said, unlike other people who have said a lot of stuff, but provide nothing, we've done exactly the opposite. We'll come up here and talk to you anytime you want, but the book, provides you with evidence. And we think that's the most important part.
Well, I want to give a special thank you to members of your team and everyone who helped put this together, and your work and Ms. Breger's work. This is what we need in this country now, right now, truth frequency coming forward, because we're living in a sea of lies. And this is the only way it's going to change, is when people like yourself and others have the guts to stand up and say, stop it. Wait a minute.
Look, the biggest mistake the state of Arizona made, and certainly cities like Mesa made, was trying to come after me, whether, partly in trying to take my child from me, in trying to, falsify charges against me, et cetera. I don't cave. We don't cave. I don't cave. My team doesn't cave. And, let's just say, put it this way, over the next month or so, the state of Arizona is going to be hearing a lot more from me in terms of legal actions and in terms of things that are going to, hopefully make some fundamental and needed, necessary changes to the state.
Thank you so much, John. With that being said, I think we will call it a wrap this time, and maybe we'll have another show in the future if you have more you'd like to present, because there's a lot in that book.
No, thank you so much, and I thank your audience, and I'm, like I said, I'm always happy to answer questions, and I think it's appropriate for people to ask them and to have them, and I'm always willing to come on and answer them.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, and
thank you.
Have a wonderful rest of the meeting.
You too. Bye.
Okay. Bye-bye.
We have found our way. It's a brand new day, and we'll be making history. Are you with me? Won't you stay? We have come so far. This is who we are, and like the rising sun, we have just begun to play our part. This is the time we form the chorus. Lift your voice for those before us. We can rely on one another. Feel the pride, let's show our colors. We are heroes and dreamers. We are restless believers, stronger than ever. Never say never. Don't look back now, don't look back now. Stand with each other. We are sisters and brothers, finding our place and running the race. We'll take our chance and seize the moment. Hold on tight and don't let go of all your hopes and dreams that light the way. We control our fate. Destiny awaits. We are all the actors in the stories we create. Hope will be our guide. We'll no longer hide. When we roll like thunder, feel the wonder from inside. This is the time we form the chorus. Lift your voice for those before us. We can rely on one another. Feel the pride, let's show